Some are born to sweet delight, some are born to endless night.
Hello, spooky friends. Of all the canceled shows we've talked about on this channel, at just 2 episodes aired, this one had the shortest run.
Now read all of...
Sleepwalkers aired in 1997 with a stellar cast. Bruce Greenwood plays Dr. Nathan Bradford, head of the Morpheus Institute. They do dream interpretation like no other. His team can sync up with you as you sleep and share your dreams. Their guidance in these dreams can be a powerful form of therapy. And if therapy isn't scary enough for you, they've also been known to pluck memories from the minds of dying serial killers. It's a good-looking show. Clearly, they did a good job with working with a limited TV budget. They don't overuse CGI, which I think would be a real pitfall when you're constructing dream worlds. Instead, they mostly let the sets do the talking. I love those 90s title sequences they made for the weirdo shows like Millennium. Those were done by Ramsey McDaniel, but Scott Milne did the titles for Sleepwalkers in the same vein. He has a fun motion reel on his site that I've linked in the description. Jeff Rona's industrial age score is a great accompaniment. Of course, they have Bruce Greenwood talk over it because it's the 90s, but only a little bit. Greenwood was fresh off Nowhere Man. Despite that show getting only 1 season, it was critically acclaimed and got good attention in the industry. Pilot director David Nutter said, "Bruce Greenwood was someone viewers really respected as a lead of a TV series. He had just finished Nowhere Man and didn't want to jump back into a TV show unless it was something with some quality to it. Basically, Goyer, Cronish, and I sat down and talked him into it." The other headliner is Naomi Watts as Kate Russell. Kate is a psychologist who studied cross-cultural mythology. She has deep knowledge of symbolism, which comes in handy when you're figuring out the subconscious. Now, I know it's very weird that a show with Naomi Watts got the axe. Weird and unfair. But at this time, she was relatively unknown in the States. It was a few years later that she landed Mulholland Drive and The Ring. We open with the pilot, Something is Buried in Bethlehem. No, not that Bethlehem, the one in North Carolina. Jeffrey D. Sams is Major Ben Costigan, a former Air Force pilot. He wakes on a train inside his dream, where a raven flies at him and he's pursued by a shadow-faced man. He wakes like most people in shows do, gasping and sitting straight up. Pretty sure if I did that, I'd hurt myself. He can no longer fly a plane because the nightmares are intruding into his waking world, causing hallucinations. But more than that, something in his subconscious seems to be eating him alive. He's dying, but no one is sure why. His regular doctor sends him to the Morpheus Institute in a Hail Mary to save his life. There we meet the volatile Steve, played by Michael Watson, and the tech guy, Vincent, played by Abraham Ben-Ruby. Steve and Kate go with Ben into his dreams to find the secrets that are literally buried. The episode is solid and basically an introduction to the 5th member of their team as they decide to hire Costigan at the end of his therapy. We are also introduced to Nathan's wife, Gail, played by Catherine Nicholson. Gail has been in a coma for some time following an accident. Nathan uses the dream equipment to join her in her subconscious. There's some nice bits in here. They are very good at choosing dreamlike sets. There's a lovely, creepy sequence filmed in the Bradbury building, the one from Blade Runner. Even the waking hours can seem dreamlike. For example, Costigan playing basketball in an alley, sporting walls painted with doors and windows, adding a surreal quality to the takes. I have 2 other favorite episodes I want to tell you about, and then we'll talk about what the heck happened to this show. The first is Night Terrors. We open with a dream of Nathan's, where he follows his wife out to a frozen lake. There he sees McCaig, played by Ray Wise. This really is my favorite episode for guest stars. McCaig is someone from Nathan's past, but we're not sure exactly when. This is an arc, sadly, that the show never has time to resolve. Back at the Institute, we meet Keith, an 8-year-old boy who is having horrific nightmares. He walks in his sleep, sometimes leaving the house, sometimes destroying his room. He lives with his father, who is a church deacon, his aunt, and his younger cousin Sarah. His mother is in a mental institution. Keith remembers little from his nightmares, just a smiling man. Mind you, this was long before the creepypasta. Nathan and Kate take him into a dream of a cathedral. Nice on the outside, scary on the inside. I think they did a great job with this set, considering there was no way they could afford to film in an actual cathedral. Director Christopher Tabori said, "Let's just surround the church elements with drapes and have the background fall off. Let's not worry about having all the specifics of a church because that's going to cost a fortune." Honestly, I think this was the better option because it made the sequence more dreamlike. Soon, the smiling man, played by the fabulous Harry Groner, appears. He seems to have control of the dream. He addresses Nathan directly and knows things Keith doesn't know. Clearly, Kate and Nathan are contaminating the dream space. In the next session, we go through the door at the back of the church to find water. Keith is terrified and has a seizure. Dad pulls him out of therapy and then brings him right back when the kid tries to stab his aunt in his sleep. That's as much as I'll say, except that she had it coming. The segments with the smiling man are magic. It's clear he was meant to be a recurring character, and he does show up briefly in another episode, but this is another story arc we won't get to see concluded. The writing is sharp, and the character is drawn perfectly. The kid playing Keith, Michael Sukanek, does a good job. This episode was directed by Christopher Tabori and written by Steve Gagan, who went on to write Traffic and Syriana. The script was apparently very imaginative, but a structural mess that Tabori had to work with him on. It was Tabori who cast Harry Groner, having been a longtime fan. Oddly enough, to me anyway, Tabori wasn't happy with the finished product. He found it too rational and over-explained. He wanted something more dreamlike. Agree to disagree. Next is one of the 3 episodes that used to be hard to get and was never shown in the US. Obscure no more! I'll tell you about that in a bit. Subconscious is a love letter to horror fans. Famous horror author Nicholas Keltz hasn't slept in 42 days. His new monster is trying to kill him in his sleep. Each night he's attacked by choking tentacles, which is weird because tentacle monsters are not at all Keltz's style. Keltz, played by the late Michael Picardi, is sassy, curmudgeonly, and sometimes even unlikable, but very entertaining. When he comes to the Morpheus Institute, he is interviewed by Kate, who has no idea who he is. This is like not knowing who Stephen King is. Vince, looking on, can't believe it. Keltz is one of his heroes. He knows every book. He's the horror nerd to end all horror nerds. But this hit home because I've always been the weird one at work. I've had my share of, how do you watch that stuff? It felt great to see myself in Vince, even if cannibal horror really isn't my thing. The first session goes nowhere, so Keltz stays in a guest room on site for the next one. Of course he can't sleep. Instead, he and Vince get drunk and talk scary movies all night.
10 horror films with the word blood in the title.
I bet my viewers can do that. The next day, Nathan decides Vince is going into Keltz's dream because he knows the world. It's his first time, and he's amazed at the realism once he gets there, but he soon catches on. Through many trials and tropes and slimings, they discover the clues to Keltz's insomnia. Though there are heavy bits, this episode is mostly lighthearted. I wonder what it would look like to a normie. I thought it was pure joy. I do have one nit to pick, though. Vince actually says,
But dogs never die in horror stories.
Dude, have you seen horror? Sleepwalkers premiered on November 1st, 1997, as part of NBC's Saturday Night Thrillogy, replacing Dark Skies. Only 2 episodes aired on the East Coast before cancellation. The West Coast got 5 episodes some months later, shown out of order. The show was created by Stephen Cronish and David Goyer, who I talked about in my vid on Freaky Links. The actual showrunner was Cronish, who was known for shows like The Commish, gritty, realistic crime shows. Goyer was brought in because he knew more about sci-fi. This caused problems because Goyer really wanted to run the show. He wanted more surrealism, but the network wasn't having it. I do think they slipped in just enough surrealism for the audience to handle. Goyer got stepped on a lot, which caused tension. According to Catherine Nicholson, David is very intelligent, creative, and stubborn. He thought the audience should be given more credit for understanding rather than feeding them typical, easy stuff. Goyer wasn't the only one who got stepped on. Goyer did some stepping of his own. Nicholson said, "Bruce Greenwood is a perfectionist, so he wanted to rewrite things to add character development, but the producers had their own timeline for that." Despite creative differences and tension, Sleepwalkers turned into a fine show, one that should have gone on for years. So what happened? Pilot director David Nutter, who doesn't sound bitter at all, said, "Sleepwalkers was given a coveted slot by NBC because another show had been canceled, but it was frustrating that they didn't give it much of a chance. It was almost DOA. It was really sad. Networks played the lowest common denominator. They don't believe in quality. They only believe in audience." But there was more to it than that. Nicholson noted, "I think it would have worked, but Warren Littlefield, NBC president at the time, just hated it, so it was doomed from the start if the ratings were anything but stellar." And there was even more to it than that, though this may have been on Littlefield. NBC waited to air Sleepwalkers until after the World Series was over. New fall shows landed 2 months earlier, and viewers had already decided on what they were watching. Then when it did premiere, it was against figure skating on ABC. Talk about the kiss of death. On its second week, it was against Early Edition, a neat little show about a guy who sees tomorrow's headlines today. It had the same vibe as Strange Luck. And it was something that would draw the same audience as Sleepwalkers. But wait, there's more! See, the delay means that Sleepwalkers premiered in November, and Sweeps Week was at the end of the month. For those who don't know what I'm talking about, back in the olden days, Nielsen Research had a bunch of families who volunteered to record what they watched 4 weeks out of the year. They still do this, but it's not nearly as important because it's easy for networks to get instant numbers. But in 1997, networks put their best foot forward quarterly in hopes of good ratings, as it influenced how much they could charge for advertising. Sleepwalkers, having been nobbled, wasn't performing. They had to get off the air ASAP so it wouldn't affect sweeps. With a short run, we lost the story of McCaig, who we would later find responsible for Gail's coma. We also lost the development of Gail, who was eventually going to be a kind of oracle that the team would consult. There was so much room for mysteries and fascinating subplots. It was a smart show with a brilliant crew behind it, but it was up against it from the beginning. Home releases were limited. There was a full VHS set in Japan for rental only. Germany and Australia got DVD sets, but with only 6 of the 9 episodes, and those were cut together into 2-episode movies and shown out of order. Seriously, the worst DVD release I've seen that wasn't a bootleg. Those last 3 episodes, Cassandra, Past Imperfect, and Subconscious, have been very difficult to get a hold of in the past. But no more, because I know how to use a Reddit. I posted the show to the Lost Media subreddit, then a guy in a trench coat stepped out of an alley and posted, "I have the whole series. DM me." After some back and forth, the user Smooshed Lion kindly sent me the missing episodes. I have made a playlist on my media channel, Old and Spooky Movies, with all the episodes in the proper order. Link, as always, is in the description. Extra special thanks to Smooshed Lion for the missing episodes, to Shovecat for their extensive Sleepwalkers page, and to Frank Garcia and Mark Phillips for all the inside baseball in their book Science Fiction Television Series 1990 to 2004. And thank you, spooky friends. I love you to death. Good night.